Welcome to How to Live Slow, the podcast where we discuss slow living for the modern woman and help you design an intentionally slower family life. I'm Rachelle Glendon, your personal slow living coach and host of this podcast. I know all about busy, but I love living slow. Enjoy the show. Well, hello and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're really well and thank you for joining me today. So today we are moving on from last fortnight's episode, which was using overwhelm as a guide, which you guys absolutely loved. I'm so grateful to you for your feedback on that one. It sounds like it's been really, really helpful. So that's so good. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely go and check it out. And now we're moving on to something a little bit more fun, I guess, or another little area of slow living, and that is how to travel slow. So you can travel slow on any amount of time. It doesn't mean that you have to take 6 months or a year and go traveling around Australia or wherever you live. You can travel slow in a weekend, because the concept of traveling slow is all about the way you approach the travel that you do. So we're going to talk about that today. Now, before we do though, I do want to remind you that it is the 24th of August. There are 2 weeks to go to grab yourself one of my one-on-one 1-hour sessions. They're only $60. This is the last time I'm going to be offering this. I'm absolutely loving chatting to all of you amazing women who are coming to do some slow coaching with me and to just really dive into the nitty-gritty of your lives to figure out exactly the thing that's going to make the biggest difference to slow your life down, depending on where you are. That's what is so great about these hours. Everybody's so unique, and that's what I really love about these sessions, is that we can really, just talk about it and figure out a strategy together. So grab yourself one of those. I'll leave the link in the description box below. There's 2 weeks left. These are available until the 9th of September is the last booking, I think the last date in my diary, because then we are going away for 4 months on our own slow travel trip. Now, slow travel is the idea. There's so much to do with slow travel, right? You think about when you go traveling, like pre-pandemic, we love to go to Europe for 2 or 3 weeks at a time and go and see like 18 cities in 14 days. That kind of travel uses up far too many resources. It's not enjoyable. You almost need to come home from your holiday and have a holiday to recover from that kind of traveling. And you kind of get stuck in the tourist traps. It costs a lot more money. You generally fly a lot, which is resource, intensive, uses up a lot. You know what I'm trying to say there. Whereas slow traveling, it's about arriving in a place and getting to know an individual place. So, learning about a new environment, like being in a town and watching the sun rise and the sunset and noticing the coming and going of people at different times of the week, that sort of thing, like shopping at the local shops and the supermarkets, watching the local TV, listening to the local radio, visiting the local bookshops, or, experiencing the playgrounds in the area, going to the local, walking trails or whatever it is, really getting to know a place and spending time exploring and not getting stuck in those tourist traps and not getting stuck on the idea, that this is one thing that you might relate to, right? When I travel or anytime, I think I shared in a previous episode where I'm like, I have so many books that I want to read. There are more books that I want to read. Even if I read 1 book a week for the rest of my life, there are more books that I currently want to read than I have a lifetime that I can possibly read in my lifetime, let alone all the books that will be written in my lifetime, So it's like, I have to be really clear on which books to read. It's the same thing, right? You get to it, and this is where slow living can apply from one concept to another in your life. When you go traveling, I'm currently planning a 4-month trip through Italy, Portugal, Spain, the UK. There's no way that we are going to see everything that there is to see. Even in the one areas, we've got this philosophy where we're spending at least 4 nights in each location, apart from a few bits where we'll be traveling. But it's 4 nights is not long enough to get to know a city. But this is much slower than what we've, done in the past, where it's 1 night here, 1 night there, or maybe just a day trip, So yeah, I think that's the difference, right? So being okay, and that's where I was going with that, being okay with making the most of each moment, each experience, rather than wishing it was different, or better or more of something and less of something else. And like understanding that even if you have a bad experience or things don't work out the way that you'd hoped, that those will become fun stories when you get home. Those will be the things that you probably remember most. Like remember that time that the train was late and we missed our tour or whatever. Like those become stories. And so recognizing, again, that that's part of the process and that there will be things that you miss out on. And this is where getting clear on your priorities is really, really important. So I think exploring places like a local is something that we all really intuitively know is such a richer experience than going to 30 churches and all of the museums and where, like you just pick one church and you see that and you spend time there and then you might go to the grocery shop and buy some local food and make the food that the locals eat. Or you don't just eat in the main restaurant area, but you find something, you take a bit more time to do a bit of research and to find the places that, maybe you don't stay in the city centre. Maybe you stay out in a suburb somewhere or something like that to get to really know an individual place rather than just ticking off the highlights. The other thing about slow travelling is the transport. So I did mention before about flying and flying being like a really resource intensive thing. So, like there was an article that came out, I think in The Guardian or something like that. It was about how Balinese tourism, like after the pandemic, like now that tourism has returned to Bali, what they're hoping for is to encourage people to come and stay for longer, because they get so much turnover of their tourists and people are just coming for the weekend or just coming for 3 or 4 nights. And they're not really, spending their money anywhere other than in the resort that they stay in because they just want to go there and relax. Like if you just want to go on a holiday where you go to the beach and you sit by the beach and you don't do anything, you don't have to fly to Bali for that. Like if you're in Australia, you can just go to your nearest beach and get that exact same experience and use up a lot less resources. But if you're going to go to Bali, why not take your whole 2 weeks of annual leave? Like, or hopefully you get more than that, but why not take 2 weeks of annual leave to go and really experience it, like really step outside the resort, really get to know the culture and local customs and way of life, maybe go out to a farm, experience, like just utilize the goods and services and the local businesses to support that economy and to give back more than what you take away by that, because realistically flying it takes up a lot of energy use, right? And if you're just, going there, landing, eating the food and drink and then leaving, you're actually taking more away. But, because those people who own the resorts are generally speaking like rich conglomerates who are not even based in that country. They don't pay taxes there potentially or, whatever. Your dollars are better utilized in other ways. Another way to think about this as well is like we are flying because there's not really any other way to get to Europe, but we're flying over there. And then when we get there, we're going to use the train system because, like, for example, we're going to be landing in Venice and our next stop is going to be Turin. And when we get to Turin, we're going to be taking the train. So we're going to leave the city centre and it's going to take us, I think it's about 4 hours or something like that. And it's from the city centre to the city centre. So we don't need to get a car to the airport. We don't need to be at the airport 2 hours early for our flight so we can check in and get our bags through and everything. And then we don't have to wait and pick up our bags at the other side and then get another vehicle to our hotel. So that it might be a 45-minute flight, but it's actually the same amount of time in terms of process. And it's like one train or 2 trains actually, because you've got to change, but it's like one mode of transport rather than a private car and then a plane and then a private car or whatever it is. Like it's utilizing existing things. Like that train is going to run whether we're on it or not. Whereas the plane, I guess the plane will as well. But, if there's less demand on planes and more utilization of things like trains, particularly in somewhere like Europe where there's a lot of really good train networks, then they're going to increase the train times and reduce the amount of flights. And that can only be a good thing. So where can you utilize existing transport networks? And the same goes for where you live at home. Like at any time you don't use your car, if you can walk or if you can use your train or bus or whatever, things that are already going to be utilized, then why not? There's a saying that's going around at the moment and it's something like, the sign of a good city is when everyone can afford to have a car. And then underneath it says, actually, no, the sign of a good city is when everyone uses the public transport system and they don't need a car. And I think that, we need to shift our mindset around that hopefully you're working towards getting your cities and your local governments to, pushing them to create better public transport and better ways of getting around the city so we don't need our cars as often, so that we can maybe have a sharing economy where we, maybe there's one car in every street and people can just utilize that one car for things that they need or whatever like that. I don't know. That's what they do in London. There are options like that. I know that. Obviously, you need a lot of people doing that, but to, make it worthwhile. But it's just being really mindful about the kind of transport that you do. Like slow travel is all about still traveling lightly and using less resources if you can, and stepping outside of those high traffic tourist areas and experiencing other places. Like I know that places like Venice, for example, where we are going next year, they're bringing in a day tripper fee so that, they're trying to encourage, because a lot of cruise ships go there, right? And basically when you go on a cruise ship and you land in a place for a day, you're taking more away from the city. Like if you flood the city with 2,000 or 3,000 day trippers from a cruise ship, and there might be 4 or 5 in a day landing in Venice. Like I've never been to Venice, but I've heard a lot of people complain about the fact that there are just so many people around. It's like really hard to get a really authentic experience because so many cruise ships are coming there and they're just flooding the city for the day. And what they've realized during the pandemic, particularly in Venice, I'm sure I read some articles about this, like because of the pandemic, no cruise ships were coming. So the waterways cleared up. So you could start to see the water was clearing up. You could see through it and see wild fish in there and things. But also that the experience of, less people around was so much better. Like people enjoyed it. It's like, oh, this is what Venice is meant to be like. So now they're bringing in a cost so that you have to pay. I think it's as of May next year, you'll have to pay. So for the following summer, a day tripper fee. So unless you're staying there the night, and I think you actually have to pay a small amount, like city charges or whatever, but it's going to be significant, a decent fee to kind of make you reconsider, do I actually want to do a day trip, or would I prefer to come and stay and actually experience the city and what the city has to offer and step outside the main tourist highlight points and actually, contribute to the place that I'm visiting through my patronage rather than just depleting it by just being in the way almost. I think even, I think in 2019, I'm sure I heard about Barcelona saying that they're suffering the effects of over-tourism. So where can you have the experience that you're looking for in a different way? And where can you feel good about your travel? So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that thinking about the way that travel has changed and the way that people approach holidays and relaxation, and so many people have realized that there's with the pandemic and all the lockdowns and everything that we experienced, that there is so much on your doorstep that is to be experienced that you haven't experienced before. Like, for example, we went on holidays and I've been there before one time for a weekend, but not recently enough to remember. I'm going to Stradbroke Island. And then we went there 4 or 5 nights, I think it was. And I was like, this is like Hawaii. This is feels like Hawaii. Like I've been to Hawaii a couple of times and it's an 8-hour flight. And sure, we were going for a wedding and, you want to visit places, right? That's fine. We did go for 2 weeks at each time, but the point being is that I went to Stradbroke Island, which is like a 40-minute ferry from my house. And it was it's got Hawaii vibes. And I was like, well, there's not any, the experience of both of those holidays was just the same. In fact, probably more relaxing on Stradbroke Island and so much closer to home, so much less resource use by flying all that way. So I'm not saying don't fly. I'm not bagging flying, but just if you're going to fly and, make the most of the trip by extending it so that you get get the most out of it, right? Make it the most worthwhile, and consider like us, we are tacking on a couple of different trips that we were planning to do into one big long trip. We're taking some long service leave and we're taking this big long trip, and we're really being mindful about, well, where are we going and how are we going to get to each location, so that we're, thinking about that. And, I'm starting a spreadsheet. This is the most research I've ever done on any trip, but I've got a spreadsheet with different bookshops, like I said at the start, bookshops that I want to visit and playgrounds. And I found a water park that we want to go to that, just things like that, different camping experiences and different ways to experience the areas that we're visiting. And I'm intentionally choosing like smaller towns and smaller little villages and places where we wouldn't ordinarily go. Some places we're going to like bigger cities. Like when we go to Turin, we're going to the Slow Food Fair. It's called Terra Madre. It's a 5-day event, and it's all about, it's run by the Slow Food Foundation. And one thing I just have to tell you, because it's so cool, they just shared this story on, I guess it's a reel, and it's basically saying about what Terra Madre is. And it says, if you think Terra Madre is simply a place to eat and drink, you are wrong. Terra Madre is a political event. It's a place where for 5 days we come together for dialogue and cooperation to find a way forward together to change the food system. Food, as reflected our culture and values, is also a question of ethics. The theme of the 2022 edition of Terra Madre is regeneration, as a process of revival in agriculture, the environment, ecosystems, biodiversity, the soil, and animal and human rights. Join the change for more good, clean, and fair food. So I'm excited to experience that event as well. But yeah, we're going to be going to the city for that. But outside of that, we will be stepping into smaller towns and villages. And instead of just driving on the highway, we'll be taking the train. Instead of just, driving on the highway, we'll be going on the back roads, all of those sorts of things. But I hope that this episode has given you an idea that, you can approach slow in so many different ways. And there are so many ways that slow living is not just about doing nothing on a Sunday. It's about how you approach life and how you use resources. And, like I shared with that slow food, it's like what food you eat and where you buy it from. And also on that note, because it is related, like food and travel and family life and parenting and the way we, all of it's so interrelated. I'm actually sharing as part of my trip planning, I'm sharing on Instagram some reels that I'm making about how I'm using up all the food in my pantry, because what happened was during the pandemic, every time I went to the shops, like for the last 2 years or so, every time I go to the shops, I just grab a bit of extra stuff to put in the cupboard for, just in case. And it's gotten to such a point that I'm actually sharing my process of using up those ingredients in my cupboard. And for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've actually saved over $100 or $150 a week on my groceries just by using up what's in my cupboard and what's in my freezer and just buying what I need to use those items. So like if I'm making a pie, I've got pastry in the freezer, so I'm, buying ingredients to make a pie, for example. So if you're interested in sort of that process, like it's all kind of, because I'm going on this holiday, I'm doing this process. So it's showing me that there's one area of my life where I was definitely not approaching it from a slow point of view. So that's been a really great thing to have done to change my habits around how much food I'm buying, because I did go through it and a lot of it's not out of date. A lot of it was fine or is fine. But there were some things that I had to throw away because surprisingly they went out of date because, the cupboards were so overstocked. So anyway, just food for thought. But yeah, so that is my little take on how to do slow travel and how you can, make the most of your experiences and your ability to travel and, get to really know a new place. Because who knows, like you may never get back to that place. If you take a once in a lifetime trip and you visit Venice or you visit wherever it is that you might want to go, like that may be the only time you get to go there. So instead of rushing through and trying to see all the tourist highlights, take your time and just be in the place that you are, experience the experience that you're having and don't try to wish those experiences away to try and find the better or the most, the peak experience, because you're just probably not going to find it, because you've got to see the moment for what it is and find the peak experience in that moment. It's amazing what happens when you just look around and experience where you are. Yeah. Anyway, that's my thoughts. And as always, if you want to come along and experience my trip with me, make sure you are subscribed to my emails. I'm sending out a weekly email and I'm going to be blogging the process as well. There'll be lots of photos and things like that. And if you're interested in that Terra Madre event that I'm going to be going to, I will do a podcast episode specifically on that and what I learned there. Because I'm a podcaster, I've applied for a media pass, so hopefully I'll get that and I'll be able to have some one-on-one chats with some of the people, or who knows, I don't know. But either way, hopping on my email list is a great way to get more slow living inspiration. So you can do that at my website, howtoliveslow.com. And don't forget that there is still some some places left with my one-on-one coaching offer if that is something that you're interested in. I would love to support you in that. Otherwise, that is it from me today. Bit of a hodgepodge one from me about slow travel and slow food and all of those beautiful things. You can tell that I just love this stuff, and I really want to encourage you to enjoy your life the best that you can in the moments that you have. All right, take care, and I will speak to you really soon. Bye. That's it for another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you'd like to connect further, the show notes from today's episode, including all the social links and free resources, are over on my website, howtoliveslow.com/podcast. Have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll speak with you again soon.